Chapter 1 The Fig Tree. The day was hot, the Galilean sun baking the earth until it cracked. Elior, son of Nathan, walked the dusty road with a wicker basket slung against his hip, full of salted fish. His sandals were worn, the straps biting into his feet. He was headed for Capernaum, as he did most market days. But this day was different. A crowd had gathered under a sprawling fig tree. Their voices hushed, all attention fixed on a man who stood at its shade. His tunic was simple, his face unremarkable at first glance, but his voice was like cool water poured into parched soil. "Blessed are the merciful," the man said, "for they shall receive mercy." Elior paused at the edge of the throng, sweat dripping from his brow. He shifted the basket in his arms, but could not walk on. Something in those words pinned him there. The man spoke of kingdoms without wars, of debts forgiven, of love that stretched even to enemies. The crowd gasped as a crippled beggar was brought forward. Elior's heart tight, and he knew the man, a fixture on the roadside since childhood. The rabbi touched the beggar's hand, whispered something too soft for Elior to catch, and suddenly the man stood, trembling, weeping, whole. The crowd roared in awe. Elior's baskets slipped from his fingers, fish spilling into the dirt. He did not care. He pressed forward, eyes fixed on the rabbi, and for the briefest moment their gazes met. The man gave him the smallest nod, as though to say, "I see you." Chapter to the silent follower. Elior did not ask permission, he simply followed. When the rabbi and his chosen disciples left the town, Elior trailed behind at a respectful distance. He was not among the 12, whose names were already whispered in marketplaces. He was the 13th shadow, carrying water skins, fetching bread when bellies ached, mending sandals when straps tore. One evening by the fire, Peter noticed him. "You there?" Peter called, a half-smile tugging his lips. "You've been dogging our heels since Capernaum. What do you want?" Elior lowered his eyes. "Nothing." He murmured, only to be near him. The others laughed, but Jesus, sitting apart, glanced over. His expression was unreadable, yet kind. He did not send Elior away. From then on, Elior became part of the company without ever being counted. When the others argued over who was greatest, Elior fetched firewood. When they were sent to preach in villages, Elior stayed behind to guard belongings and to the sick who lingered near camp. He said little. His faith was not in speaking, but in serving. Chapter 3 The Loaves and the Fishes. The day was long, the hills green with spring, and the crowds endless. Thousands had gathered to hear the teacher. They had not thought of food, so consumed were they by his words. The disciples fretted, "Send them away. Fill up purged, let them buy bread in the villages." But Jesus shook his head. "You give them something to eat." A stunned silence followed. Then Elior, who had been weaving through the crowd, returned with a small boy tugging his hand. In his other arm he carried a bundle of barley loaves and the dried fish. "It is not much," Elior said softly, placing them at Jesus' feet, "but it is what I offered." Jesus looked at him, eyes warm, and lifted the loaves skyward. He blessed them, broke them, and suddenly there was food enough for all. The people feasted, laughter filling the air. Yet no one remembered the quiet man who had gathered the offering. No one save the teacher, who gave Elior a look that needed no words. That night, as stars burned bright above the lake, Elior sat apart, mending a torn sandal. He was content. Chapter for the storm on the lake. The Sea of Galilee churned black under a bruised sky. Waves slammed the boat, spraying brine into Elior's face as he clung to the side. He had crossed these waters many times as a fisherman's son, but never had he seen the lake like this. Peter and Andrew wrestled with the sail. James bellowed commands, and John clung to the mast, his knuckles white. But Jesus was asleep in the stern, his head resting on a folded cloak as though the storm were nothing more than a child's tantrum. "Rabbi," Peter cried over the wind. Do you not care that we are perishing?" Jesus stirred, his eyes calm, and rose. The boat pitched, but he stood firm. He lifted his hand. "Peace, be still." At once the wind fell silent. The sea smoothed, the stars reappeared. The only sound was the disciples' ragged breathing. Elior sank to his knees, trembling. He had seen healings, yes, but this was creation itself obeying a man's command. He whispered a prayer he could not finish. Staring at Jesus with fear and eye intertwined. And in the quiet that followed, Jesus' gaze swept the boat. For the briefest instant, his eyes lingered on Elior. Chapter 5. Among the crowds. The days that followed were a blur of voices, of pressing crowds, of desperate hands reaching for the hem of Jesus' garment. Elior often found himself at the edge of the masses, guiding the weak through calming arguments, or lifting children onto his shoulders so they could see. One afternoon, a woman pushed past him. Trembling, her eyes were sunken, her frame gaunt. Elior instinctively reached out. "Are you well, sister?" She shook her head, clutching the cloak around herself. 12 years of bleeding, and no physician could help me. But if I touch him, her voice broke. Elior stepped aside, clearing her way. He watched as she touched the fringe of Jesus' robe and froze when she collapsed to her knees, healed in an instant. Jesus turned. "Who touched me?" The disciples scoffed. "Rabbi, the crowd presses all around you, how can you ask?" But Elior knew. He pointed gently toward the woman, who wept at Jesus' feet. Jesus lifted her chin, his voice soft as the wind through reeds. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." The crowd erupted in wonder. Elior stepped back, unseen, yet his heart swelled. For he knew that sometimes the greatest miracle was not the healing itself, but the courage to reach out. Chapter 6. Whispers of betrayal. The closer they came to Jerusalem, the heavier the air grew. Whispers of arrest shadowed them. Pharisees watching with cold eyes. Romans shifting uneasily at the swelling crowds. One night by the fire, the disciples quarreled again over who would sit at Jesus' right hand when his kingdom came. Elior listened in silence, mending a torn water skin. Finally, Jesus sighed, "The greatest among you must be servant of all." His eyes flicked to Elior, though he did not name him. Later, as the others slept, Elior kept watch at the edge of camp. He overheard murmurs from Judas, slipping into the night to speak with strangers. His gut clenched. Something was unraveling, though he dared not voice it. That night, Elior prayed as he had never prayed before, not for himself, but for the strength to remain when others fled. Chapter 7. The Last Supper. The upper room glowed with the warm flicker of oil lamps. The table was set with bread, wine, bitter herbs, roasted lamb, the Passover meal. The disciples crowded around, voices filling the air with laughter and nervous energy. Elior stood in the shadows by the doorway. As he always did, he had no place at the table, no title among the 12. His task was to ensure the water jars were filled, the bread burned, the lamp trimmed. Yet from where he stood he saw it all. Jesus broke the bread, his voice steady. "This is my body, given for you." He poured the wine. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." The disciples exchanged uneasy glances, but Elior's heart froze. He understood before they did. This was farewell. When Jesus rose and knelt to wash their feet, Elior instinctively stepped forward. But Jesus caught his eyes and shook his head gently, a faint smile on his lips. "You have washed us many times already. Elior, tonight, let me serve him." Tears burned Elior's eyes as he stepped back. He longed to cry out, to beg the teacher to escape Jerusalem, to flee, their shadow closing in. But he held his tongue. His role was not to speak, but to remain. And when Judas slipped into the night, Elior saw him go. He whispered to himself, "It has begun." Chapter 8. The Trial. The garden smelled of olives and damp earth. Torches pierced the night as soldiers stormed in, led by Judas Kiss. The others scattered like startled birds. Peter swung his sword wildly before fleeing. But Elior stayed, hidden in the shadows. He followed as they bound Jesus and dragged him through the winding streets of Jerusalem. He slipped into the courtyard of the high priest, blending with the servants by the fire. He saw Peter there too, denying 3 times that he even knew the man. Each denial struck Elior like a hammer blow, but he said nothing. Inside, Jesus stood beaten, mocked, spat upon. Elior pressed his forehead to the cold stone wall outside, whispering prayers through his teeth. Strengthen him, O Lord, do not let him stand alone. When Pilate brought Jesus forth, battered and crowned with thorns, the crowd howled for crucifixion. Elior's nails dug into his palms until blood came. He wanted to shout above them, to demand mercy, but fear kept his voice caged. He could only follow silent as they led the rabbi toward the place of the skull. Chapter 9. The Cross. The hill of Golgotha, the stank of blood and sweat, of iron and dust, soldiers hammered wood, curses and jeers mingling with the cries of the condemned. Elior stood at the base of the cross. The women wept near by Mary the mother, Mary Magdalene, Salome, but the disciples were nowhere to be seen. Only John remained, holding the mother's arm. Elior pressed close enough to see every shuddering breath. He whispered words the crowd could not hear. You are not alone, I am here. When the sky darkened at midday, Elior trembled, clutching the rough wood. Lightning split the heavens, thunder rolled like drums of war. The earth itself seemed to protest. And then it was finished. Jesus had bowed, his body still. Silence fell heavier than any storm. As soldiers turned away, Elior knelt and gathered the discarded nails, burying them in the rocky soil so no child would ever stumble upon their cruelty. He pressed his forehead to the blood-stained wood, and for the first time in years he wept aloud. Chapter 10. The Empty Tomb. The third morning dawned cold, the sky pale and heavy with mist. Jerusalem stirred slowly after the Passover. But Elior had not slept. He wandered the outskirts of the city, keeping watch near the garden where they had laid the body. He saw Mary Magdalene hurrying past, her face streaked with tears. Then silence. Not long after, she returned, running now, her cries breaking the morning stillness. The stone is rolled away. Elior's chest seized. He hurried to the garden, but stopped short when he saw the gaping tomb. Peter and John rushed inside, voices echoing, but Elior stayed at the edge, his hand trembling against the olive trees. He did not need to look inside, he believed. When Mary later whispered, I have seen the Lord, Elior wept quietly, joy and grief mingling like river and sea. For the first time since the cross, hope bloomed again. Chapter 11. The Return. That evening, the disciples huddled in a locked room. Fear they could smoke. Elior stood by the door, a lantern in his hand, guarding against Roman patrols. And then suddenly he was there. Jesus, standing among them, wounds still visible, yet radiant with life. Peace be with you, he said. The room erupted with cries of wonder, disbelief, tears. Thomas staggered back. Peter collapsed to his knees. Elior could only stare, light trembling in his hands. His breath caught as Jesus' eyes swept the room and found him. You were always here, Jesus said softly, though no one else seemed to notice. Elior felt the words burn into his heart like fire. He lowered his head, tears dripping silently, the lantern flickering against the stone. From that moment, he needed nothing more. Chapter 12. The Final Days. Years passed. The others travelled far. Peter to Rome, Thomas to India, Paul to distant lands. Their names spread like seeds on the wind, carried in letters, carved into memory. But Elior stayed. He tended the sick, fed the poor, guarded the widows. He mended nets for fishermen who returned to their trade. His name was never written in scrolls. His deeds never shouted from rooftops. Yet wherever he went, peace followed. In his old age, Elior often sat by the Sea of Galilee. Children gathered at his feet. He told them stories not of himself, but of the rabbi under the fig tree, of the bread that never ran out, of the teacher who calmed storms with a word. "Were you there?" the children asked, wide-eyed. Elior only smiled. "Yes, I was there." When his final day came, he closed his eyes and dreamed once more of that first moment, fish falling from his hands, a rabbi's gaze meeting his own. And in the dream, Jesus' voice came again. "Well done, Elior, you were always here." For the forgotten disciple was forgotten no longer. That closes the story of Elior, the silent follower, a novel-like arc of a man who was always present, though never named.